What if the story you've been living your whole life wasn't actually the truth?
What if it was just a set of old beliefs created years ago that are still running the show today?
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Milt.
And this is Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where we explore how the narratives in your head shape your life
and how you can begin rewriting them with clarity, compassion, and tools you can actually use.
Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone. All right, in the last episode, we talked about why healing can sometimes feel like you're regressing and how your nervous system will use that time machine and time travel back to the version of you that feels most trained to survive certain situations or certain people. Today, we're going to kind of take that one step further and we're going to jump into what's called the belonging phase. So, the law and order layer, I guess, where, rules and roles and expectations can feel like safety. But we're going to unpack that. We're going to unpack how this shows up as, people pleasing, how it shows up as holding back, losing your voice, and even getting stuck in relationships because, vulnerability doesn't feel safe yet. So if you've ever thought, why do I know what I want, but I can't seem to do it? This episode is going to be just for you. Let's get into it.
All right. So the next phase, and I really like these two. So the ground floor. And this is the belonging phase in Kohlberg's stuff. And he's got sub phases in all these. Like there's the law and order state. Another version of this would be an educated state. Like I now know what I'm supposed to do according to my tribe and my society and my, the groups that I'm surrounding myself with, but I also start to understand the consequences of actions. And so if I do good things, I get good things generally in return. If I do bad things, I get bad things in return. And so when you're in this phase, it's really interesting how we get into some traps. This is where a lot of my clients are like, okay, so I moved from dating someone and now I'm with them. And why is it I can't get to a vulnerable state of sharing all of myself with them? Like my wife and I talk about this all the time because we know we both struggle with vulnerability. And we've been able to label it, describe it, all of those things. And yet our body will not release vulnerability because we struggle to trust that what the other person is going to do with that information is going to feel protective. And so then you're judging yourself as your relationship not progressing, except that we've opened more and more vulnerability over the years if we observe it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're better at talking through things. In fact, we're better at laughing through things now. And then we're not living on the expectation of what a relationship should be. And that's
And
where
what
this is.
vulnerability is.
Yes, because we have to recognize that we learned to be safe in the state that we developed in, not in our joint state. We came together in our 20s. We were already formed human beings at that point. However, especially if you share a lot of cultural common constructs, there's a ton of expectations that they should see the world the way you do. They get the order that you get. And when they don't, that's unsafe. That's smoke. And that's where fights happen. Then we start doing things like holding back from what we're saying, biting our tongue, not standing up for what we think is important. But have we even asked the question, is it important or is it just the way that I know how to do it?
Right. Is
It's
it
a,
actually important to me or is it what I've been told is important?
yeah. One of the biggest struggles we've had is living over 250 miles away from most of our relatives. Most of her family lives up in Salt Lake. I've got some family in Richfield, Utah, which is about 100 and some odd miles from us. So we've been able to keep connecting with them. But generally speaking, I mean, everything's at least a 2 to 3 hour car ride to get to go see anyone. And that is very different than how we grew up. We both had all our family around us all the time. And so our kids have had a very different upbringing. And when we tell people we can't come, initially it was like a lot of pressure because expectation is you come to these things. Or we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be there. And we ended up using all our time off sitting in a car. and sort of enjoying ourselves. But things weren't getting done around our house, and, like, our kids weren't getting to play with their friends on the weekend because we had to go do stuff up north. So the law and order phase also kind of becomes a people pleasing phase.
Mhm.
And we have to really watch out here about what is actually driving the rules. This is where change becomes really hard. This is where we take someone who has a substance abuse background and we ask them to really look at the environment they're in, the friends they're connecting with. Are those friends going to actually help you towards recovery, or are those friends going to keep you stuck?
I
That
actually
matters.
had that conversation because with my current internship, I'm working with in a substance recovery program.
Mhm.
And yeah, we had that conversation last night of as they're in this process of recovery, really having to be selfish in a different way, in the sense of like setting those boundaries, right? And saying, like, I'm not putting myself in this position. I'm not engaging with those behaviors anymore. I'm not going to see those people, especially if they are not respectful of where you're at and what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And just having to, yeah, like have those hard internal conversations and really setting those boundaries when that's all you've known forever for
Mhm.
some of them that have been in the whole system, the whole process for like 60 years. Like it's a long thing and having
60, 100
to,
years. It might have been 3 or 4 or 5 generations back.
yeah. Yeah, 100% going to the family aspect. That's even harder.
Well, let's take an example. Like, we're looking on bringing on another overseas worker. And if I told you the rate we paid them, people would think I'm doing slave wages. However, in their country, when we pay them that, we're actually paying them at a professional rate. But in these other cultures, there's other things that we have to prepare these people for. The moment they start getting more money, there's an automatic assumption in this part of the world that the family, everyone's families, all the way back to fourth and fifth cousins, can just automatically show up if you are the one that has money and they are supposed to take care of you. And trying to help people realize how to help people raise up as opposed to just kind of get, for lack of a better term, leached off of, because that's what some of them do. We have to help them figure out how to diversify their money. So it's not just that we hire them and we pay them, we actually help them understand some cultural things of like, hey, I understand this is how your family operates. You benefit from taking care of your family. And if you get successful enough, then you can do things like open a restaurant and employ other family members, doing things like that. And so we show them how to grow businesses with the money they're making in their savings because again, the barrier to entry is a lot easier in some of those countries, whereas here to start a business, it's really expensive. And so then you're teaching them outside of like, here's the rule, but you don't have to just follow the rule because that's what everyone's told you. But we're now talking thousands of years of teaching here. We're not talking about hundreds. We're talking about culture that's existed for a much longer time. And who the hell am I to tell them the culture is wrong?
Right.
Because it may not be
And
wrong for
how
them.
yeah, and how to help them still, I think, like, and this goes for like us as well, like how to still find purpose, or not, maybe not purpose, but like I'm gonna just stick with purpose. How to still like connect with that aspect of our family and our
Mhm.
culture, and whether it's like just family culture or like ethnic culture, just like the culture,
All of it.
all aspects of culture, how to still connect with that while still having your own values and boundaries and like sticking to that, like doing things for yourself while still having that connection to that very deeply rooted sense of belonging that comes with
Yeah.
culture, I think.
And I think it's really more about like understanding that the rules existed for a reason. Like they didn't just come out of nowhere, whether they're good or bad, right? Like I mean, we've got plenty of rules that we could talk about in our culture that are good or bad. but they exist for a reason. Until you get to the place where you can start identifying who you are in relation to the rules, that's when you can transition to the next phase. So this is where we start to understand our parts. This is where we understand the manager parts. This is where we understand the firefighter parts. And they come up through these rules, through this structure, through this supposed order. And this is where you get to start asking yourself, am I safe because of the rules, or am I safe because of me? Well, the answer is both. I mean, the reality is, as much as I really don't like all the things that are going on right now in the world, I live in a really safe community. You know, I mean, I'm not even up in Salt Lake where there's, you know, a heavy population where I don't think you leave your car unlocked, and we leave our car unlocked all the time because we just don't have people rummaging through cars. It happens so rarely that we don't think about it all the time. I'm going to be grateful for what I came from and what I have. And I'm still going to start questioning from a value standpoint, is my part right? Or is that aligning with who I want to be as a self, as the person? And so that's where you get to start asking this. This is why it's the teenage phase. Teenagers are notorious for trying to figure out who they are. And they're really good about asking questions. But we as adults don't feel respected when they do. They
It's
ask
true.
why and want an answer. This is not a toddler asking why. This is a teenager saying, this doesn't feel right. Something about this feels off. Help me understand. And then we've given them lessons and said, this is how you treat other people. This is how you act in public. This is how you show respect to people around you. And then they come back and say, yeah, but that's what, not everyone's doing that. Or when I do that, I get hurt, or, you know, I don't want to. And they're not asking just to be little shits. They're not asking just to be troublemakers. They are actually asking to try to figure out what matters to them. But we, as the adults in the room, because there's all these rules that tell us adults get privileges that children don't.
Mm.
So you can see how you would easily get stuck in not developing at all and being an adult child, the adult who watched everyone else go through the phases, and now they're finally at the adult phase, and they demand that everyone treat them like they treated the adults from the past. Another word for that might be boomers, where they demand that they put in all their time. They've circled the sun this many times. This is where the time machine comes again. They've circled the sun so many times. They've put in their time. Now they're entitled to the respect that their parents got, or their grandparents got, or all this other stuff. And that's not because they're doing it on a values thing. They're doing it off of, I've done my time. So they're treating life as a prison sentence, and they're finally free. And now all the other prisoners are supposed to hold them up. What a crazy way to look at the world. As opposed to, I served my time and I followed the rules of society. Are those good rules? Are those the rules that I want? Are those the rules that I want to pass on? Which is, of course, the last phase. But I just want that to kind of like sit with people for a second. Is there is an entitlement to social order. And that's part of the problem with the law and order phase. Is anytime someone comes along and says, yeah, but is it right? They're labeled the disruptor. They're labeled rebellious.
I think, like, I recognize this aspect in the sense of the expectation of a woman, right? And going back to like the gender roles and things like that. When I made the comment of, I don't think I want to have children, and I started questioning that, and I started really thinking about that and questioning if I wanted to ever get married and if I wanted, like, what I wanted that to look like. It was very much a moment of me saying, like, I've been told this my whole life, and I have always been told about like how great children are and how all these things and also how horrible they are and how you're going to get someone you're going to get a kid that's you times 10 and all this stuff and really asking like but is that actually what I want for myself? And it's still a question that I sit with to this day, but there was
Sure.
so much pushback because that's not the process, right? Like that's not what's
Mhm.
supposed to happen. So yeah, I can definitely relate to
And so they're using that statement as the smoke that leads to fire, because if you start having kids, here's where it gets really funny. If you stop having kids, who pays for us? Like, let's just
100%.
strictly statistical facts. I think it was when they implemented Social Security back in the Great Depression, I think there were 42 workers for every retired person in the country. Now there's two, two workers for every retired person.
It's
In
insane.
other words, in other words, you can see why shame is used a lot in this phase, because
Mhm.
keeping people conforming makes sense. That means that law and order isn't always order, it's safety. And the question is have I grown past that? Have I actually gotten to strengthen where I'm living my values and knowing who I am? Because if you don't ever have children, okay, you don't have children. I'm
Mhm.
excited for my grandbaby. I'm more excited for my grandbaby than I was for anything in the last 10 years. And I have my kids and I loved having kids. It was great. Like it's a weird transition. And I'm not going to tell people that they're wrong if they never want grandkids or they never want kids or they never want to be attached to anything, because they have to figure out what works for them. But don't do it out of just structure or rebellion.
Mhm.
And this is where we get to the third phase, which is the leadership state. The principles phase, but in Maslow, it's called like esteem and self actualization. So in this phase, we're starting to say, what do our values mean to us? And are we living them? This is the self aligned phase. So this is where grow and strengthen really become the core. We're living in these phases now because I'm not doing what's right because everyone's taught me this. I'm doing what's right because it feels right. We talked about this a little bit on the last segment of short videos me and Rochelle did, because I was thinking really heavily about what does it mean, because I'm angry right now at things. And some people are making me very angry because my values tell me that there are certain things that we don't do. And apparently those things have happened a lot. And people who I thought aligned with my values are not speaking out the same way that I am. And so I'm angry. And I'm noticing that my F states are coming back: fight, flight, freeze. Not fawn. I have no desire to placate anyone. I definitely don't want to freeze, but I either want to run away to maintain relationships because I don't want to tell them what I really think, or I want to go and fight them and tell them what's wrong. And it dawned on me, I can't just look at those things as bad or limiting. How can I live out my values in a fighting state now? What are the things that I can do that accentuate my values, that put me in a principled state? Because that's where I know I'm being me. And that feels better. I can't fix the world. I can be the best version of me that I can. And I can accept that they're doing the best they can with the skills they have. It's still really hard to watch bad things happen to other people. It makes me sad, but I'm living in sad now. And I'm starting to understand that these things exist for a reason, because they're, again, anger has the motivation of mastery, right? So I'm trying to be more masterful at how I explain things. I'm trying to express more effectively my values. And I'm trying to give people the opportunity to think about things. And I'm not debating anyone. That's a value I'm standing on, because debate doesn't lead to anything good. Right now, people don't want to debate, they want to convince. I'm happy to throw out questions. I'm happy to sit with people who want to actually think about things. I have no desire to just sit with someone who wants to prove me wrong. And I'm trying to fight everything in me to prove them wrong. That's a different value that I'm trying to act from now. That's a principle that changes the way we see the world. It's so much nicer to live principled because, again, there's never been a time where there hasn't been bad things happening in the world. Name it.
You can't.
I mean, either we were giant animals at one point, and then it's just eat or be eaten. And we moved into, people and tribes, and we didn't like this tribe because they did things differently than us. So we got to go war with them, or they've got water and we don't, or, they've got prettier women than we do. I don't know. Like, there's so many reasons. And that's never changed.
No.
We just do it on a much bigger scale. Now we do it over property lines and fences. And they do it differently than us because they are, they don't clean their yard or respect their yard. I don't know. It's so dumb. Like, we want to just anything that's different, we want to run away from. And that's not living us. That's just an overgrown childhood state.
I think that's a great example of the living in the law and order aspect, right? Like 100%. And it I think we've just expanded on the idea of that, but like, no, this is how it's been, this is how it's always been, or this is what I think I deserve, this is what I think I should have. Like
Yeah.
those things feeding into that, and how like that we see that in so many different ways and in so many different scenarios and aspects.
So going back to the model, I think the thing that we got to wrap up on. So really at the top state, we're talking about just knowing and living your values. And that's where the grow and strengthening. Because even now I'm on developing new layers of what it means to be genuinely kind to people. One of the big words in my religion is charity. And it's defined a couple of ways, but one of the terms is the pure love of Christ. The idea that it's just this unconditional positive regard for the people around you, that everyone is worthy of that, not because of any other reason than they just exist. And I'm finding new ways to do that, even for people I don't like. So being okay that we climb up and down this ladder at different phases with different people is an okay thing. It's part of learning how to operate in the SaaS model, that we can jump around and that we're going to have days that we go backwards and forwards and sidewards and upwards and downwards and all the things. That's a Willy Wonka quote if you remember the Gene Wilder version. I'm grateful that instead of this expectation, I'm learning to just be in this moment and try to be the best version of me that I can, instead of worrying about where am I supposed to be just because I've traveled around the sun. I'm going to get to 49 times coming up in a few months. 49 times around the sun. So many times. I know a lot less now than I used to, and it's so much better. Any final thoughts you have?
Yeah, all I can keep thinking about is just how flowy and how fluid like this model is. And I genuinely appreciate that so much, because I think when we get into like the hierarchy of needs, or when we get into very like, this is stage 1, this is stage 2, this is stage 3, it can feel so defeating to regress what we think is regressing when we have to go back to stage 1, or we have to go back. It feels like we're going backwards, and then it feels like we've lost all the momentum, and that's not true. That's not accurate. And so I really appreciate how the SaaS model, and I hope it feels the same for our listeners as well, but like it does just feel so much more fluid and so much more, this is all I can see. Like I'm seeing just like energy flowing in my brain when I think about it, and I just appreciate that. So
Cool.
yeah, takes the pressure off.
Awesome. Signing off.
We'll see you next week, guys.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Rewrite Your Story. Take a moment to notice what story showed up for you today.
Remember, you're not your story, you're the one holding the pen.
And each moment is a chance to write a new chapter.
Be sure to join us next time as we keep exploring the path towards self-alignment.
We'll see you then.